Namaste, Dena, and welcome to another podcast of the Eternal Self. I'm so glad to be back in conversations with you today.
And I'm happy to be back.
Thank you, Dina. Dina, first off, I want to tell you I've started to get calls from people who are thanking me, but more thanking you for the work and the content and the books that they're reading and the transformation that they're bringing to their life.
Very happy to hear that. Very happy to hear that.
And specifically, I wanted to share one. Somebody had shared with me that she was like mentally blown away because just 2 weeks back, before she got introduced to your work and to the untold stories of Sita, the first book that, my first book that I read of you, so she said that just 2 weeks before she got introduced to all of this, she had a dream. And in the dream, she saw exactly the same scene as in the Shok Vatika, how you've described in the book, and how she saw the same white bird and this whole kind of women there in captive. And she said that as long as I'm wearing my Tulsi beads, you cannot uh, so her bewilderment was that what she had dreamt was exactly how it's also explained in the book.
I think that the there is an awakening going on, an awakening to the reality of Sita, to the deeper understanding of the narrative, which has a lot of implications for our own time. And I think that's why people are turning to it now. I mean, it's very, very important now to go back to that story and to see it in a new light so that it can help us address some of the challenges that we're facing now with some of the same negative forces that Ravana unleashed are being unleashed in our time. And so I think both Ram and Sita, and many people may not realize, but I did finish some months back a sequel to the untold story of Sita called Sita's Yoga, where the teachings are given in greater depth to as a guide to us now. So these are I think very important, and it's heartwarming when I hear people reacting to it so deeply. That's what this is all about. You know, my goal in writing the book was to help people reconnect with Sita and with Ram.
Yes, it is touching people's heart, and I'm getting a lot of feedback on, the whole concept and the books and the transformation that they're experiencing from reading the books. As well, I'm sure you're getting all of that feedback directly yourself as well. You wanted to say
Even in this
something?
country, I was at a spiritual gathering in California last week, and I was surprised how many people came up to me having read the Sita, Untold Story of Sita. And, you know, I've written 6 books, but that's the one that has touched people the deepest.
Yes, yes. I mean, I've said it a few times on the podcast, but I'd love to just express it one more time, Tina, that my own narrative of Ram and Sita, despite being born a Brahmin, so to say, in India, but my own narrative of Sita and Ram got corrected through your work and through the untold story of Sita. And the deep reverence I have for that, I have no words to express.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. I'm happy to hear that.
So thank you once again, Dina. Today I wanted to, there are a few things that are going on in my mind. One, we had talked about that we are going to start touching upon some universal laws. So that's one narrative I wanted your, like, if you would like to take that direction. And another thing that's been going on in my mind is something I read from another book, but I think I've had a similar kind of, I have not had personally a similar experience, but it's been on my mind about this author, Joe Dispenza. And I was going through some of his work, and he's talked about one of his specific meditation experience, where at one time in the meditation experience, he experienced three of his states simultaneously: his younger self, his present self, and his future self. And if I remember it correctly, the way he's described it is that he could see them simultaneously in that experience. and he could talk to each one of his versions. So I wanted to understand from you in more clearer ways, how does this, what is this parallel universe and parallel existence that is going on, and how is it important, or how is it impacting us in life?
So, one of the areas of interest to me of late, and it's always been an interest to some degree, because my guru's first book, Yogananda's first book, was The Science of Religion, and when he talked about meditation, he talked about it as a science, and he didn't see uh, uh, um, our spiritual life as a religion per se, a set of beliefs. He saw it as a science, as the science of the universe, and he talked about the Vedic sciences, which is how I referred to. I see the rishis as scientists of a kind, and so of late I've been following the cutting edge of physics, and the cutting edge of physics, at the where they're moving toward is seeing the unreality of time, that time is just a construct, that both time and space have no ultimate existence. And I've been listening to, because I'm actually organizing a program in January at NIAS, the National Institute of Advanced Studies, a dialogue between scientists and spiritual teachers. And this is one of the themes, because as you approach the speed of light, time slows down. If you exceed the speed of light, time reverses. There are all kinds of physical laws that are showing that time does not have an ultimate reality. But in order to construct a Maya, in order to have a human life, the brain constructs a linear version, a linear progress of time. But I listened to a physicist last night on YouTube talking about whether you can go into the past and into the future and what that looks like. And what Einstein concluded is that there is only that it converges into it's all now. It's the past and the future and the present are all happening simultaneously. So when I write about the past, I actually am back in that time frame, trying to describe what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. My body doesn't move, so I think traveling in time doesn't mean that you disappear from here and find yourself somewhere else. That's movies. But what it means is that, and I try to explain this in the teaches yoga. In Traita Yoga, it was much you understood this concept more deeply, that time was just a construct, and that you could see into the past and you could see into the future. You could see into the potentials that could unfold. The future is a potential, um, and it's difficult for the mind to comprehend. So let's just talk about the past. So you can see past versions of yourself. You can project yourself back into those past versions so that you can actually experience what you experienced at that time, what it was to be like to be so and so at such and such a time. You can relive those experiences and feel yourself back in the past. But what you can't do is change the outcome. That's one of the questions that this physicist raised. You can't go back into your past and kill your grandfather because then he wouldn't exist. So
Right.
it's not a matter as some of the futuristic movies out there where you can go back into the past and change something, and it's not like that. But you can experience your past selves. In the same way, I started writing this book, Memories of a Future Life, which I've talked about before, where I was projecting myself into the future. And I see many things about that future because many things are set already based on what's happened before, based on who I am now and all that's led up to this. I can project and see what the next articulation of me will look like. But there are some things that are likely to happen but might not happen, depending on what I do now, because my life is not over. And so that's something that I'm sort of grappling with now. So all of this to say, you have a past self and you have a future self. And you can put your consciousness, so much of what we're aware of is where we project our consciousness. You can project your consciousness to many places. You can project your consciousness to the furthest part in space and know what is out there. It's about learning how to project your consciousness into different time periods because, as I said, it's very hard to break out of the confines of time because this is the construct that we live in this human body. But we're more than human. We're not just human. We're
So,
a soul, and the soul is not limited by time.
so Dina, are we saying that the matrix, so to say, is time and space is the construct of time and space is what's constricting us inside the matrix?
It's what enables us to have a human life.
That's what enables us to have a human
It's
life.
like gravity. You know, it's like without gravity, we wouldn't be able to have a human life. We wouldn't stay on the earth. So there are certain physical laws that pertain to the physical universe in a certain way I mean, there's a big question if there is life on other planets, will the same physics apply to them? We don't know that yet. I mean, most likely to some degree, they'll still have gravity. You know, they'll still be functioning within a time frame, but it may be that they've overcome space. In other words, one of the physicists was asked how an advanced civilization could come here if they're, you know, a million light years away. It would take them a million years to get here. She said, well, they could penetrate through space. In other words, project themselves. It's not a matter of following the speed of light. They would have to be advanced enough that they would know how to get around that. So they could project themselves into different parts of the universe without needing to get into a rocket ship or whatever, or following the normal. So these are questions that are emerging in physics, and what surprises me has how open they are to exploring what the sages have always known, that there is no reality to space ultimately, and there is no reality to time, and yet and yet we live within those frameworks
Framework.
because that's how we construct a human life.
So the next step in that concept for physically, I also know that, there's a part of the human brain, the parietal lobe. So when people who have been into meditation and practice, they tend to have this inquiry about the outer space because their parietal lobe, which is all about the spatial orientation, that starts to kind of activate, and that's why they've developed interest in outside of the physical existence that most people are happy to just confine themselves to. So that's one concept, Dina. But this concept of parallel existence in future, past, and present then next goes into this idea of the idea of going into the void or the quantum of the universe as such, is that in that once you leap the boundary of time and space, you go into that void, which in dhyan, I mean, nirvikalp samadhi has always been about that void, accessing that, which is complete but it is also a void. And in that area, because you've dissolved all these two ideas, you can start to construct your life. And again, it's coming back to the idea of reconstructing your present self. This is how that narrative goes. How much does that relate to how you look at things?
You know, I think that we live with many constrictions. There are colors that we cannot see because our eyes can only perceive a certain spectrum. There are sounds that we can't hear. I mean, the universe could be filled with harmonious sounds, that we don't hear because our ears are not designed to pick up beyond a certain spectrum. So the whole nature of human existence has been within a very restricted field.
Wow.
My
Yeah.
Guruji, when he would speak, he would say, if only you could see all the beings who've come, light beings who've come to join me in this talk. So if you could see, you would see many, many, many light beings. But that's not the way our normal human consciousness is designed. So the whole point of spiritual practice is to evolve beyond the normal human consciousness. The masters who have siddhis, who materialize and dematerialize, they know how to master the laws of physics. The laws of physics can be mastered. Those who can see into the future. But I mean, this is a question that that I don't know how to think about yet. You can see into the future, and that the future is not 100% set because there are things that we can do to affect it.
Yes,
For
that was
example,
my big epiphany, Dina, when I read in the Yoga of Maharishi Vashish, the Yoga of Vashish, that, because in India, the idea is always that your destiny is preset. That is the belief system that we grew up with. But when I read in the Yoga of Vashish, that future has multiple potentialities. So it's not set in
I
stone.
mean, your current set of circumstances is an outcome of what you've done in the past. So there are things that you can't change. Because of things that you've done in the past. It's not preset by any external factor, it's preset by your own actions. I mean, what you have control over is how you use those circumstances to grow. And so it's your mindset, your attitude, but you also have control over your future because how you respond to the set of circumstances affects your future trajectory. So we have more control over our future than our current set simply because of the law of cause and effect. So when people say things are predetermined, my question is, well, by whom? By you. You predetermined,
I agree.
choices that you've made, choices that we've made, uh, you know, consciously or unconsciously in the past have created our current circumstances. There's nobody to blame, or nobody to praise. I mean, we created it ourselves. But we are moment to moment designing our future most often unconsciously, but we can do it consciously. And then there's certain things that are already determined based on our past karma, which, we most likely have not completed. And so if there's things that are not completed, they're going to manifest in the future. But we can shape how we use those situations. I mean, the whole point of the law of karma is for growth. It's not for reward and punishment. I think that's a great, great mistake. And it's sort of like comes from the Abrahamic notion of punishment and reward. But the whole understanding of cause and effect is that you take responsibility for how you've been in the past, and you use that for growth. And if you don't use it for growth, you'll have another opportunity until at some point you've learned enough that you can use these circumstances for growth. And nobody can tell you what the lessons are. You have to figure it out yourself. What am I to learn from this experience?
Hmm. That is a
Soul
self-inquiry.
knows. Yes, which is why, and I think I say this in the Sita's Yoga, self-inquiry is as important as meditation and the spiritual path. Because
Hmm.
I've seen people who meditate who don't do the self-inquiry, and then you're not using what you've gained in meditation to grow. So you have to be looking at yourself and seeing the parts of yourself that are holding you back, that are hampering you, that are causing you distress. And you have to address those things, or they'll keep popping up again.
Right. And also at some stage, if people start to naturally, I'm coming across a lot of people who are talking about it. If people are starting to naturally develop their intuitive abilities, either through their spiritual work or however they're getting to that point, maybe it's just growing exponentially at this point because a lot of people are openly talking about it. and but every time there is something that comes to pass because you were already kind of intuitively sensing something, it's obviously mind blowing. Again, it's something that the human brain cannot comprehend. How does that happen? What can they do to stay grounded in such, how do you comprehend these kind of things?
Has to be a balance. There has to be a balance. And, one way I've dealt it, when I first started seeing my previous uh, births, I questioned myself and I actually did research to see if what I was seeing was accurate. And there are certain things that you can, when you're talking about life, experiences that are closer to the present, it's easy to check them out. When things go far back in time, it's harder. One in the Treta Yuga, and the rishis talk about this. When Sri Aurobindo talks about the higher yugas, he talks about the rational mind was less prominent, and the intuitive mind was stronger. People, how could the rishis know that the distance to the moon was 108 times its diameter, that the distance to the sun, they didn't have the measuring tools that we have now. How did they know that? Their intuitive mind was highly developed, and so they could perceive these things. They just knew because they attuned themselves, whether you call it the quantum field or whatever, they attuned themselves with the higher reality, and could intuit these things just very naturally. But through the decline of the ages, the intuitive mind grew quiet, and the rational mind. And I talk about this in Sita's Yoga, how there was the consciousness was shifting from much more of a collective conscious toward the individual. Maybe
Yes.
that was necessary for evolution. Individual became more important, and with that came what I want, and I want more of this, and I want to have control over this, and don't care how it affects the whole group. My needs come first. And you see that we've gone through the Kali Yuga where it now has become so extreme that it's become destructive to the whole planet. And so the evolutionary need is for us to move back into a collective awareness and away so much from me, and more from what's good for the whole, what's good for the earth, what's good for life. That's what we have to focus on. So that's an evolutionary movement, and that means awakening the intuitive faculty, which has been dormant in most people. Of course, there are always people who are beyond any age, but the intuitive mind has been dormant. So I think that's why it's awakening now, is because how do you connect deeply with the earth except through the intuitive mind? The rational mind says it's just a dead thing, that I can use and abuse as I please. I can dig it up, I can put poisons in it. That's what the rational mind doesn't see the earth as a living entity that we're in relationship with. But the intuitive mind is relational. It understands relationships. And so we're at an evolutionary a crisis point, crossroad, where the intuitive mind has to awaken again. And I think that's why you're seeing so many people respond to this.
Because it is needed at this point. I get it. And Dina, people who are still grappling with developing it or do not understand what do you do once it's developed, and some who want to develop it further, what do you recommend? I mean, how is there, or is it simply grace and cumulative effort of their sadhana through births? How does it?
I think that there um, many ways, and one has to be careful because one can also be imagining things, right? There's always that possibility. But through through meditation, through self-reflection, and I think now there's a real call for connecting with nature, for spending time, taking a walk in a park or a forest, sitting by a river. That's all part of of cultivating these relationships, which helps change our perspective from the rational mind, which is one of separation, to the relational mind, which is one of connection. And so I think all these things are very helpful. And then all the spiritual practices, where so many are available now, whether it's japa or mantra or pranayam, there's so much available now that you have to sort of design what works for you, reciting the name. Um, but I think essential for everybody is to spend time in nature right now, because nature will help us evolve. It's a mutual relationship.
Yes. I always say this to people. I always say my all my healing has happened through being in forests, being obsessive about being in forests. So I totally understand and get where you're coming from. Dina, one more thread on that topic of the void and the experience that I was talking about is something people are experiencing as healing with an instant remission through the practices of pranayam, through the practices of bandhas and things like that. Do you have something that you'd like to say or share on that?
I mean, I think that one has to be consistent and persistent and have patience uh, to 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 truly progress. I mean, one can have an instant healing by a connection with that deeper self, which is no different when you're talking about the void. That's the deeper self. That's who we are. But then we come back into the world, soon after that. And the world hasn't, we may have gone someplace, but the world hasn't. So we'll be faced with the same challenges, uh, personally and collectively as a human society. And so one has to keep doing it. I don't think people sometimes feel that they have a one-time experience and that's it.
Yeah.
And a one-time experience is wonderful, and you can ride on that for some time. But you have to continually be doing the work. In other words, my guru used to say the spiritual path is difficult, but the worldly path is much more difficult.
Hmm.
The spiritual path is difficult because, sometimes you don't feel like meditating, and, sometimes you just give into your impulses. And it takes constant self-monitoring, you know. But there's always a response, a response from whatever we call it, the divine or whatever. You take a few steps toward the divine, and the divine reaches out to you, whether we call it the quantum field or however we refer to that. There is a response. And so we have to just keep doing what we know we need to do.
So, Dina, this is a little personal, but if you may, I just want to have one more answer from you. It's just something that I've been going through for. It's a phase for me. If that's okay, can I just run that one past you? So I've not been meditating as I used to before and everything. It seems like it's just not happening anymore for me. I'm not able to ground myself and have that discipline that I had for over a decade even. And somehow somewhere I'm saying that maybe I'm constantly feeling connected and that self inquiry is happening and I don't feel the need to make an occasion out of sitting on an asana and doing the things on an asana because I feel I can be like I don't know why I'm sharing it in my personal way, but that's the truth. Like, is that my mind playing tricks, or could there be a stage where you feel that that specific ceremony of sitting down and setting a time aside is necessary for future growth? Because I've also understood, Dina, that anybody thinking that they've figured things out is another mode of ignorance. Because I personally have realized and come to that humility that I cannot fathom infinity, and any kind of high horse on spiritual understanding is almost delusional, and from my understanding I've got to that point.
So that's a very personal matter. And I mean, I've gone through periods where it's difficult to meditate and, occasionally I'll skip a day, but and I don't beat myself up on it. I don't, let myself to go, oh, guilty and all that. I just sort of go with the flow of it. However, I know that I'm more deeply connected when I am meditating. And I think that eventually, you might be able to ride on a little bit. You've built up a certain sort of store of karma through meditation practice that you can ride on for a period of time, but you want to keep filling that. I think it's not wise to give up the practice. If you need to take a little break from it, and if you can find other ways of staying connected, doing japa, or sometimes meditation I know is not for everyone. I know people who find that for them their spiritual practice is jogging. When they're running, they
Okay.
get themselves into another zone. I mean, I know that happens for some people, and I can't. I mean, it's not, it's not for everybody, but you have to do some introspection and say, is this my path or not? I know that would be hard for me to go through life without meditating. And have when I struggle with meditation, when it doesn't come easily to me, um, that's usually because it's not there are other things going on sort of in my there are concerns or worries or anxieties that are just percolating, that is keeping me. But when I am able to touch that deep center through meditation, there's nothing like it.
Hmm.
And so I would say everyone has to find their own path, but I strongly advocate to keep up the practice of meditation, even if it's for 10 minutes a day.
Yes. Yes. I hear you. I understand. Actually, yes. But 10 minutes a day. Sure. Okay. Let's move us away from that topic, Dina. For this podcast, we've run a little over time as well. I just want to wrap it up with your final words on a few random areas that we've discussed. But if you would like to just sum it up in what direction this may be going
We,
in.
we've covered a lot of things. We've covered time and space, which interesting to watch for those who are drawn to this, how science and the masters are coming to the same understanding. And yet we have to live within the constraints of, just like within the limits of our vision and our hearing, we live within the constraints of human life, knowing that we are much more than this human life. And when we leave this human body, we will have an expanded consciousness. We will be living in a different reality. And so there are multiple realities. I think one can hold the awareness of those multiple realities at the same time that you're existing within the confines of time and space and human reality. And I try to show that in the Sita's Yoga during the Treta Yuga where the people were much more aware of of their larger existence and aware that they sort of like projected themselves into a human body for a specific purpose, but that they were much, much more expansive than that. And I think that's one of the things that we work toward in our spiritual journey, toward that awareness. Because we can all live in Treta Yuga, no matter which yuga we're in. We can all live in Sati Yuga, but it's a matter of consciousness. And so there are many, many ways that we can awaken ourselves spiritually, meditation being a key one, not the only, but a key one. And so I think each person is different, and that's the beauty. We have our own relationship with the cosmos, with the divine, and we each have to create our own path. And by sharing our ways, maybe we can help each other. But in the end, we create our own path forward.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dina. I just got a few ideas for our upcoming podcast. I was wanted to check with you if it would be worthwhile talking about this very famous concept of Kundalini awakening. when you talked about the expanded consciousness, that's what came to my mind. I've heard a lot of people have that experience. I personally, I don't know if I've had one or not. I don't think I've had one, but I wanted your view maybe for the next podcast as to what does it mean to experience that expanded consciousness, and how does that relate to this Indian or the concept that I've understood to be known as Kundalini awakening. Is
Take that as a subject for our next talk.
okay, lovely. I look forward to talking soon.
Be
Namaste.
well. I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Dina. Thanks very much. And see you then.